All right. Well, it looks like most everybody has made it in here so far. Welcome again to another one of our webinars. Today we're doing the same. We're keeping the same format we've been doing. So if you have any questions as we go, type in the chat box. We'll try to answer some as we go. Also, or at the end, depending on how the questions work into everything. Today it's going to be a fairly simple-ish webinar. We're doing fixture selections and sorts and all these options up here at the top of the screen, along with the fixture chooser itself and laying things out, some of the tools that there are to help you make this nice pretty layout that we see here and some of these other layouts like this one. So without further ado, we'll get started here. So our first thing is we're going to start with the sorts and the selection options and the fan options and all this fun stuff here, since this is probably the more involved thing. To start with that, I'll just explain a little bit about what we have going on here right now. So when we select fixtures in the fixture chooser, we have this little number in the blue dot up here, and this is our selection order. So in this case, our default selection order, default order is going to be by selection. So I'm selecting this way from left to right. It's going to be 1 through 10 that way. And if I go the other way, it will be 10 to 1 or 1 to 10, whichever way you want to look at it. Our default selection tool here is our rubber band selection, and these tools are down here in the lower right hand side of the fixture chooser window. Rubber band, just I'm drawing a box around the fixtures that I want. Some of the other tools here are a lasso tool. Here's where I could draw a circle around fixtures that I want, and it will select them that way. Don't use that one that much. Maybe a specialty option if you have something to use it for. The other one that I would use is the drag over option. The benefit to this drag over option is it's going to make the selection order as you drag over it. So if I wanted to do something like that, I could, or if I want to do something even more elaborate where I can't really do this as I couldn't really do this as any sort of other selection order that we have in these tools, that would be what I'd do there. So another specialty thing, if you have a situation for it, it might work out great. But for the most part, I'm going to stick with the rubber band tool because I like nice square boxes and I'm OCD. So now we've determined how we're selecting our fixtures that way. We want to look at our orders and how our selection order applies to things. So with selection orders in here, these are key for things where we're doing fanning or effects and things like that. It would run from 1 through 10. And we can change these orders using the sort order drop-down box here at the top. There are a number of default sort orders in here, and we can create our own as we go. So the first one is selection in the order that I select them from. ID would be my next one. ID is going to go by what our user ID on these fixtures are. So in this case, no matter which way I select these, it's still going to be 1 through 10. And if I select multiple ones, it's still going to be 1 through 10 and 11 through 20 because of my ID right here. So that's great if you know you always want to make sure you're going by that way, or you have fixtures that are scattered in different areas in your layout, but you still want them to be in the same ID order. Another one is random. Random just is going to assign a random number to that selection order. So it can be handy for running effects randomly across fixtures. Position is going to go by where these fixtures are in relation to the top left corner of your fixture chooser. So somewhere up here. So if I select these, in this case, it's going to look exactly like some of the other fixture selections like ID because they're laid out in that way naturally. But if I had, in this case, I've got fixture 11 up there. It's going to be kind of hard to see those numbers. But because I have it selected as position, let's do it this way. It's still going to always have the lower numbers on the top and the higher numbers on the bottom, even though I've selected them in a different order because it's going by position. And our last default one is odd even. If I select odd even, it's going to basically do this as a repeat of 1, 2, 1, 2. Odd even is a new one that's added in Vista 3. And what's handy about this default odd even here is you can use the keyboard arrow keys, the left and right arrow keys, to toggle between the selections. So if I hit my right arrow, it's going to now select just one of them, all the odd fixtures, and then all the even fixtures. So it's easy to go through and bounce between fixtures, give them intensity and color, and then bounce the other section using the arrow key and give them another color. And I can go back and forth. Now on a actual console, depending on the console you're using, such as the EX or the S1, you have these arrow keys in the super playback section. They work exactly the same way as the arrow keys on your keyboard. The difference between these two arrow keys, though, is you can hit them both together at the same time, and what it will do is it will reselect the entire selection. So it's very handy, especially if you're using something like this, where I'm going with a single fixture. And again, I have my arrow keys. So if I hit my right arrow, I'm going to bounce between them all. And if I were to have a console hooked up and I hit both the left and right arrows together, it would select them all. Now, it doesn't work on a standard keyboard just because that's the way keyboards work, but it does work that way on a console. This is me trying to make it work on a keyboard. Something else that's important to note with the way you select fixtures in Vista is it's an additive selection. So as I select fixtures, I can continue to select other fixtures until I change something. So to go back here, I'm going to deselect everything. And again, to deselect your fixtures, you just click in any of the blank areas around the screen. So if I were to select those fixtures, and then maybe these fixtures, and maybe that fixture, this is adding it in here. Now, as soon as I change a parameter on any of these fixtures and I go to make another selection, it's going to change from that selection to a new selection because it's going to assume that we've already done what we wanted to do with these fixtures and we're ready to do something else. So in that case, I select this fixture and those clear out and we're back to, we have just this one selected. Some other things on the fixture selections. When I'm going by selection, everything I've been doing so far has been straight across, so it's been pretty straightforward as I go. When you're doing it by selection, Vista is going to calculate where you are in the screen and select the fixtures based on where you started and where you ended. So in this case, if I select these just from there over, it's going to go through the top, the first 10, and then beyond the 11 through 20 after that. If I were to select these two first and then drag across, it's going to change this up. Now it's going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, up and down vertically. So just by changing the order that you drag across the screen is going to change your selection order. So you can get really powerful with the way you're doing things between there just by changing that. It also works on things like copy and paste. So if I take two fixtures, Control C, copy that look. If I were to paste that look across the rest of these fixtures this way, I'm going to get that repeated look that way. If I were to take it and paste this look going this direction, I'm going to get it's basically going this up and down. So now all these are one and all these other ones. So again, it's the same things, it's just a different selection order. Same thing with going in the inverse. So I can get some really crazy effects going on just by changing the selection order. Now this one doesn't look the same because this is a color wheel fixture, so it got me close as it could. So in addition to these, we can also do custom sorts. And when I hit custom sorts, it's going to open up this window. And in this window, it shows me the default ones. I cannot do anything with these. If I wanted to create my own sort, I could by hitting the new icon, the little new button here at the bottom. And then in this sort, it's going to have some default options in here. The idea is when you're in sorts, you're probably going to want to change these ganging options. So for anyone who's been in some of these other webinars already, they might notice this window looks very familiar, at least this part of it. This is also found in the Smart Effects window. So when I create effects and gang them up in different ways and repeat them in different ways, it's the same exact operation here. But when I do it in here, this is for when I select fixtures for just standard programming. So for example, in blocking, if I wanted two fixtures to work together based on this preview, it'd be AA, BB, CD. Going to name that real quick. And now if I select those fixtures, I'm going to see it's going to be 1 to 1, 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, 4, and on down the line. Again, the order in which I select things is going to matter. Another one that we can do here is something with repeats. So that's with blockings, and this is with repeats. So if I wanted to make, I have an odd and even selection, but if I want to make a every third fixture selection, I can make a repeat of 3. Oops. If I can spell correctly. And now I'm going to have 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 down the line. So we could go and we could make our own sort orders in here based on what you need in your show file. And again, we can, just like in Smart Effects, we can combine these. So we could do a blocking and repeat combined together and make some interesting ways. Also, what we can do is in something like, let me close this for a moment. Let's go to a different fixture here. Let's take one of these. I'm going to take a little more basic one. In a fixture like this, oops, let me go back to selection, where I have 7 elements in this fixture, I could create a sort that selects the outer 3 or the outer elements and the center element separately. So in selection, I would do a new sort, and I would say a blocking of 1/6. And this may or may not look quite right with the way this fixture is done. Just because I'm not entirely, yeah, so it's putting element 1 over there. So actually, let me change this. Here we go. We can do it this way. Oops. Let's change this to 6/1. This one has really weird elements.
No,
so
it's correct. If you hold down the yellow modifier for a second, the middle elements in the middle. So if you do your sort by ID rather than selection, so if you go back to your custom sort, no, your custom one, that's the normal one. Yeah, go back to your sort.
Yes.
And then do the
By
ID.
ID.
Yeah,
there we go. So actually, this will have to be the change back to 1/6.
That's right, yeah.
There we go. There we go. That makes more sense. So with this sort, I'm selecting the center element and then the outer elements all together. So as I select any of these fixtures, they do that same thing. So I could come in and turn on the intensities, but also using my arrow keys, I can bounce back and forth between the outer rings and the center ring. Oh, that's too Christmassy for me. It's not that time of year yet. So yeah, so you can get in there just by using these slashes to get us some other interesting looks. All right, so let's go back into here. All right, so that was sorts, and that's sorts for programming. The next thing that sorts works with is the fans. So in fans, we have our default of linear fan, fan from end, fan from start. It's basically similar, just the opposite of each one. Fan from center and fan from both ends are very similar to each other and opposite. So we're going to cover a couple of these. In Vista, I can fan any parameter. So our quick key for fanning in Vista is holding the yellow modifier or the control key. So for example, on a color, I pick my center color, and then I hold, right now on my keyboard, I'm going to hold the control key. And as I hold that, I'm going to click and drag my color across the fixtures. So on a linear fan, it's going to start at one end and it's going to go to the other end. And here's where I'm at. So I'm starting here and I'm going that way. Or if I, because of the direction I drag is toward fixture 1. I could fan other parameters. Most likely you're going to fan position and color, but you could also fan gobos and things and focuses and irises. So our default fan is our linear fan. Another one is a fan from end. So in that case, when I click on my start color and I hold my controller yellow modifier, I'm going to drag the color out from that spot. And there's another little shortcut in here that's kind of unknown. But if I hold the Alt key and pull a fan across it, it's always going to do that fan from end, at least on color. It's kind of a shortcut if you always want a fan from end on that type of stuff without changing this. So it's another little note to have there. And then our fan from center. So what I could do on fan from center is I could also change my selection and do to selection order. Grab this again. And as you can see is when I'm doing a fan from the center, my selection order changes. So now I have a 1 on each end. I'm going down to the 5 in the middle. And if I drag that color, it's going to be in the same on each end and then go to the purple in the middle. So those are some of our fanning options in there as well. So these are things you can play with as you see fit, as you're needing on a show. Our next little button up here is split and group. So what this does is this applies to multi-element fixtures. So fixtures like this one here, where there's actually 3 concentric rings or 4 concentric rings of elements. If I set it up as split, it means that if I were to grab that fixture, let me zoom into that thing real quick. Ooh, there we go. So now if I grab this fixture, and again, I'm going to use the arrow keys because it's the best way of showing how you're selecting things. It's going to select each element individually. Now, if I have this fixture selected and I change this, and I can see I got the selection order here, change this to group, it means that it's going to select this entire fixture as one. So in this, for example, if I select these 2 and do group, and I use my arrow keys, it's bouncing back and forth between both fixtures. If I change it to split, it's going to go through each element and then back to each element on the other one. So this button is handy for the multi-element fixtures, something like a color force or any other fixture like this. And again, when I'm in group, it's going to control everything together. And split. There. All right. So I kind of went through that pretty quickly. Are there any questions on that before moving on to some other things?
Not at the moment.
All right. All right, so that's some of the sorting options in there. Next thing I want to talk about is some of the fixture chooser options. We kind of combined some of the fixture chooser stuff that we see here into how this all works, so that's helpful. Some of our view options, and I know we touched on this briefly in the initial webinars, but in here we also have our view options for zooming in and out of fixtures, and you've probably seen us do this quite a bit during these webinars. We have our minus and plus zooms. We also have the zoom to fixtures. So if I have a specific fixture selected and I say zoom the fixture, it's going to kind of highlight, get me right in that one. And then also the 100% zoom where I'm going to see everything in here. Along the bottom of the screen, we have our different tabs for our different layouts. And these are all layouts that have been previously done. So in this case, I'm going to create a new layout, and I'm going to start from scratch on some new stuff in this layout. This is going to get kind of chaotic for a moment. So when we're in our fixture chooser, I can create a layout by right-clicking anywhere in here and go to layouts. Say new layout, duplicate layout, rename, delete. What can be handy is when you're in a show file, you can duplicate your layout. Say you like this one here, but you want to tweak a couple of things in it. So if I said duplicate layout on this one, Flown Trust copy, it's the same one. It's a similar, well, I won't say same, but it's similar. But I can go and make some changes to this. If I decided I want to put these, split this rig in half, maybe move these, oops, I have to unlock it first. Maybe move these over to here. and move these over here. I can do that stuff without changing the initial layout. So if you have something you've already liked that's close in a layout, you can duplicate it and make those changes there. In our layouts window, we're going to go into manage layouts. This is where we have the option to select what we want to see in each layout. So here's my flown truss copy. And again, in this window, I could add a new layout by doing the plus or take away layouts by hitting the minus. In this window is here some of the things that I can do. So item visibility, one of them, is what's going to let me show what fixtures I want to see in this layout. So in this case, these are the ones that I'm showing. If I don't want to see one, I can click on it and remove it. I can also see groups, and if I had matrices, I could see the matrices as well. In the center of the window, we have our layout properties. So this is where I can set up some of the stuff. Say in fixtures show intensity values, the number in the center, I can turn that on and off. Labels show names, turn that on and off. Labels show IDs. Elements show IDs. So that's another one where there's actually a way where when I'm holding the control button, I can see that temporarily on these elements, but you could turn that on permanently in this. It's one of those things where on a fixture like this, if you have them all on, have that on all the time, it's probably going to get a little chaotic and it's going to be hard to see all the time. Labels ignore rotation. If I rotate this symbol, I can keep the label to stay straight up and down. Labels ignore zoom. What's nice about labels ignore zoom, and I'm going to show this, is if I zoom way out, now I can still see the labels, but they're kind of overlapping each other. So I can set this up to either ignore that or zoom in and out. This could be handy if you only have a few fixtures and you want to zoom them out, but you still want to see the labels. If you did this, you might have to space them out a little bit more as well. Notes ignore zoom. We're going to get into notes in a minute. Auto show new fixtures and auto show new groups. This is one of those settings where, depending on how many layouts and how many fixtures you have, or if you're constantly adding or removing fixtures, you may want to turn these on or off. Personally, if I have a show that's already built and I'm got my layouts all set up, I'd probably want to turn off both of these. That way, if I go in somewhere and I have to say later on I have to add something like a hazer or something, it doesn't pop up on all of my layouts. If I turn off auto show new fixtures, then I know that that fixture is not going to show up in there, and I'll have to manually add it to the layouts that I'd like it. If you have this on, sometimes what will happen is when you add a fixture to a show file, it's going to put it way down here somewhere. So it's going to make things a little bit weird. So it's one of those things that if you already have it established, your layout's established, and you like what it's looking, you might want to turn that all off. Same with auto show new groups. Snap to grid. If you're incredibly OCD like me, you probably want all these fixtures to snap to the grid. And then below that is the grid spacing. So the default is 10. I found that 50 or 60 is actually a handy one. Personally, I like that. So now what happened is these are going to snap into these points wherever I have that. So, and again, I can turn the grid on and off. I like having the grid. It's just the way I've been using it for a long time. So, and if you have these settings that you like and you want to keep using, you can hit it as save as default. And then any layout you make in the show file will use that default setting. All right, so as for arranging icons, now that I've changed the group or the grid settings, things have gotten a little wacky. So I have some other tools here to make this all work. So one of the first ones and most basic ones is when we select fixtures and come in here to align, distribute, flip. This is all has to do with the icons. If we want to align the tops of the icons or distribute them, I'm going to start at the bottom of the list and work my way up, actually. So I'm going to do arranging grid. So this is how we get us our nice lines, our nice rows, things like that. So right now, by default, it wants me to do 3. I want 1 row, and it's going to automatically calculate how many columns. And the spacing the spacing is the grid spacing between the icons. I am not sure what this is going to look like. Let's see. Okay, that looks all right. So if I like that, that's how I can make that. Also, if I arrange in grid and actually leave it as 2 rows, here's how I can make my nice neat layout depending on what I want to see. Some of the other tools, arrange in circle. This is a new one in Vista 3. When I have in my arrange in circle, my fixtures are arranged there, and I have these grab handles in here. So if I grab the center point, I can move that circle around. There's a handle in the middle here where I can adjust the rotation. And then the outer spot here, I can size the circle bigger or smaller. So if you have fixtures on a circle truss, you can easily add that in there now. All right. Also, arrange an arc. Arrange an arc looks just like the circle. Still has those same tools. We can just change the angle of this. So if you just have fixtures on an arc, you can do that. Same other tools for size and rotation. And again, I'm going to go back to my grid, which is a line. Makes me feel better. So some of the other tools, flip vertically, horizontally. Vertically is not going to do anything because it would flip them top to bottom. But if I were to decide I wanted to flip them horizontally and make 1 over here and 10 over there, I can quickly do that. Also distribute. Distribute does exactly that. It's going to distribute to the 2 endpoints. And then finally, some of the align options will align all the fixtures to the left, right, the topmost, bottommost, leftmost, and rightmost fixtures. So in this case, if I were to say range to align to the bottom, it's going to kick everybody down to come to where that fixture is, and vice versa for the top. And if I've got 2 that are up there, it's going to go to the uppermost. All right. Any questions in that area? Are we good with all that so far? I'm going to kick that back down to a nice little grid there. All right, some of the other options in here, other things we can do. Notes. So notes are handy. If I click anywhere in a blank area of the Vista layout, I can add a note. That is actually way small. So I'm just going to kind of kick in here a little bit. I think in this layout, all my fixtures are zoomed way out. So if I create a note in the blank space, it creates what's called a free note, which I can put anywhere in here. If I click on have a fixture selected and add a note, it's going to create a note that's tied to that fixture with a little leader line here. So if there's a particular fixture that I'm using that I want to say, hey, you know, this is my singer, I can have this on here all the time. So it's tied to that fixture. If I want to get rid of the note, there is some changes right now in this version. It's items and it's delete it that way. So that would take it away. Delete that note. Some of the other things we can do with fixtured icons to help organize things is set colors of fixtured icons. So if I take this one and I come into items and then come down, and again, and I guess I kind of skipped over this, but in hide and unhide, that does the exact same thing as ticking and unticking that checkbox in the layouts here. So if there's a fixture I don't want to see, I say hide and it's going to go away, but I could always check that box again and manage layouts to show it again. So under here, we have icon color. This lets us change what the background of this icon is going to see. So if we want to say color code our fixtures as to what type of fixture they are, we could do that. And then let's see here. I'm going to find dimmers. So in this situation, we have the icons that are colored in the background. There's another one we can add in here too, which is the gel color. So in this case, these are dimmers. And by default, these would be in white, just like this. It would come up as white. But if I want to add into this the gel color, I'd go to items and gel color. And here's where I can select, hey, what color is that light? What color is the center of that going to look like when it comes on? So more ways of customizing the layout to be what you want to see. All right. We can also renumber and rename our fixtures in this layout. So here we go. Here's a good one because these are all lowercase. They drive me up the wall. So I'm going to rename these. There's then a couple little tools in here. When I name a fixture, if I add a pound sign or hashtag to the end of the name, it's going to correspond with, it's going to add a number in there. So if I were to just name this point like this, they'd all be the same. But if I add this extra little variable in here, it's going to automatically give me that number in line there. So I can see that. And it's handy because there is a note that tells you what that is. As for changing the sizes of icons, we can do that also in here. So with these zoom options down here, we can use these zoom options when we have fixtures selected and also holding the control key or the yellow modifier, I can zoom these icons in and out. So while I'm doing this, I'm clicking on these options, but I'm holding the control the whole time. And then I also have the 100 icon, which will take me back to its default size. So this is actually the correct size for all of these. So I'm just going to do this real quick on all these, just so this all goes back to what would be the normal size. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to range and grid. Boom. Oops. There we go. That's nice. And these I'm going to leave big, just because they're already kind of big fixtures to see anyway. Another thing you can do is holding the control key. If you're using this on a machine with a mouse and a scroll wheel, I can hold the control key and I can run the scroll wheel on the icons up and down as well. So it's another way of doing this. One of the things you got to watch out for is if you're trying to do fans at the same time, or you happen to be doing fans and you hit control and you start rolling your mouse wheel by accident, you'll start to zoom up and down your icons. So that's why it's good to know that that does that, so you know how to prevent it from happening to you by accident, or you know how to fix it if it does happen. So, all right. Let's look here. What else do we've got in here? Okay. Notes. We did our notes. We did our icons. And now our icon spacing looks a little bit better here as well. All right. So, yes. Next up is backgrounds. So in our layouts, we can add a background to the layout. We can change it. We can do a couple different things here. So we could change our background color in our layout to be a different color if we wanted to. And normally that isn't really a thing. The big one in here is background image. So when we select background image, it's going to take us into our show resources folder here. And in this case, I have some images in this show resources folder. So we can underlay an image in here that we previously brought in, a JPEG or PNG file. And what we have is we actually have, this is how we created that front view kind of 3D look from in that other view. So if I click on that and I open it, it's going to lay this thing in here. What we recommend is not resizing this. I could take this and resize that image if I wanted to, but it's best to leave it at its default size and then zoom the fixtures in and out to match that. So in this case, if I had a front view like this, I could put my fixtures over the truss, and then I could use my zoom functions to zoom them in and make them look like that. Another way is in our background images, we can do, instead of a front view, I can do something where it's an overhead view of all my fixtures. Those views are great for troubleshooting. They might not be so great for programming because it is kind of harder to see where things are, but you can go in here and it's nice to have. And this is on a per layout basis. So just because I added a background to that one doesn't mean it goes to any of the other ones. I could have a different background on each one of these layers, each one of these layouts if I wanted to, but I can only have one background per layout. And then under background, if I want to get rid of it, I could erase it. Yeah, so if I remove it or change the size, you can, however, it does cause some GUI rescaling issues when you switch between things, so that's why it's best to leave it the same as where it is, as its default.
Can you quickly demo the 3D view locked, Ben, with something actually running on it? The one that's already pre-made.
Yeah. So here's a pre-made 3D view, and if I have fixtures on it, I can see where things are. And this is going to show me most of everything. There are some fixtures in this layout that are not on there. If I grab those and give them color and fan that across things. So it's kind of like a poor man's visualizer. It's going to be great for things where it's direct view, I think, for the most part. I don't have any cue lists in this show to actually show what's going on, but things like your position, you're just going to see the icon move in there. And then there's also the 2D plan view here too, as well. So in the 2D plan, this is where I can lay my fixtures over top of the trusses or where they all are. Clear out everything real quick. This is where the benefit of having multiple different types of views and layouts helps, because in this case, this layout right here is a great layout for troubleshooting. If I'm looking for, that blue par and figure out, how do I turn just that one on, I can find it really easily. But in this layout, ignoring the fact that I've got group icons here first, in this layout, if I wanted to grab all of the blue pars, that was kind of a pain to do, to grab them all. So that's why it's helpful to have other layouts of the same fixtures. So in this case here, this layout has all of the blue pars in it as well, and I can drag and grab around them all and go like that. So this would be more of a programming, this type of layout, this type of setup would be more of a programming setup, and something like this, or even this, would be more of a troubleshooting or playback type layout. But again, it's the same fixtures in all these. So it's the same fixture icons in any one of these layouts. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what I'm looking at. That actually reminds me. I forgot to look at some of the rotations of these. So along with the resize, I did resize. You can resize this way. It's the long way of going through it. But there's also rotate. So if I wanted to have an icon turn sideways, or if I have a truss of diagonal fixtures, I can rotate the icon, which is exactly what we have in this view right here. These are all the same square icons, just turned 45 degrees. All right. Now we'll undo that. So that's I think that's about what I have for layouts. Are there any questions on that so far? I tried to
I'll come back and answer those last two questions. Can you show custom fixture arrangement, Ben, for the Robin 1200s and how you get the concentric ring.
Yes, perfect. All right, so these fixtures, by default, when I patch them, they'd be in a line of 4. And we made a custom fixture arrangement right here. And that's where I can do this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit restore defaults. And this is going to show me, this is what it would look like when I originally patched this. If I didn't have this custom fixture arrangement already predefined, I'd just see 3 or 4 circles like that. In this custom fixture arrangement window, this is where I can change what these look like. So the same tools would apply here as we used in here for zooming in and making fixtures, the icons larger. So in this case, I'm going to hold my control key and I'm going to use my zoom on my mouse wheel. And I'm going to change the zoom level of these and I'm going to drag and drop them over top of each other. And this one I'm going to just make smaller and bring that in there. And I'm probably being way more OCD about this than I need to. So that's how I can make the concentric rings on that. So our first step is laying out the physical of how we want to see them. When I'm done with that, I hit next. And the next step is going to say, how do I want these to be selected in? So in this case, right now, all the numbers are right over top of each other. But what I'd do is I would select these elements in the order that I want them to be, in the element order that I want them to be. So it'd be 1, 2, 3, 4. And when I'm done, I hit finish. And here's where it's going to say, do I want to save this layout in my user data directory? Which means that any fixture that's patched, this XML file that's created is going to apply to that. So if I say yes, then you can see that all of these have just changed into the new layout that I just did. If I patch more of these fixtures, they're going to take on this layout automatically. If for some reason I want to have some of these fixtures in this fixture layout, but I also want to have these fixtures not in this fixture layout, I'd actually have to create a copy of the fixture profile and patch that separately, and then I could have 2 different layouts for these fixtures. Because yeah, right now if I patch these, I'd have more just like that. That was for concentric rings. If I had a fixture that was, I guess it's kind of hard to do with only 4 elements. Let's do this. Let's cancel that for right now. Let's go to, which one should I do this in? Yeah, now, it's like, which one do I want to really screw up? Let's go here. And a fixture like this, I'll hit the default. So here's what this looks like in its default state. So again, if I wanted to have a single element with the other elements around it, I can use the same tools. I have the tools available to me to do the arrange in circle. So I can select them all and then move them around and overlay them over top of that and dial that in as close as I can. And then next, here's my original element order. If I want to change that, because in this element order here, the thing about this element order is this can change, especially on a moving head. If you have a moving head fixture that has elements on the front, depending on which way you hung that fixture, it could go element 1 might always be the center, but 2 might either be here or might be here. So this allows you to kind of dial these things in based on how your fixture is actually hung, or which way it's homing and which way you want to see it. So now I have that element order in there and I say finish. Again, it's going to ask me if I want to save that. I say yep. And there's it's updated all my other fixture profile, or yeah, fixture arrangements. And then at any time, I can go back and restore to defaults or load it again from the user data. So if I restore it to defaults, it doesn't delete this arrangement. It just doesn't use it. And then I can reload it if I decided to. Yes, that was a good one. I forgot about that, adding that in there. Thank you, Jack. All right. How are we looking on time? Oh, got plenty of time here, looks like. What else do we? Any other questions on this so far? Because I am just about through all of my topics for now. For this one, I do go quicker just because I go quick. Obviously, there are some options in here when I'm doing the arranging grid too, based on user ID or selection order. Most times you're leaving it user ID, but for some reason you decided, let's say the selection order has actually helped at times. Let me move these up here again, where, my user ID might be great, but let's say someone hung one of the fixtures wrong and I want to reorganize these, or they hung a lot of the fixtures wrong and I'll reorganize these. If I go by selection order and decide to go that way and then this way, and then arrange this in grid by selection order. Now I can see that my user ID is different, but it's arranged it so that their fixtures are mirrored. Little things like that can be helpful. I've used this to save myself a number of times without actually changing the fixture ID, because maybe I just don't want to change the ID. But on the flip side of that, you got to watch out if for some reason you have this, you go to arranging grid and you have it set to selection order and you decided to select everything backwards, because I actually do that quite often. I usually select my fixtures backwards. It's just the way I've done it for some reason. If I go in arranging grid and leave it at selection order when I did that, now everybody would be in reverse order. So, and it did all kinds of fun stuff too, because it not only did I have it already backwards, but then I had it inverted as well. So, yeah, that can be fun. So I'm gonna go back to ID to make it all the right way again. All right. So I think that pretty much sums up everything I have here. I will the last thing I'm going to point out, and the most important one, and I have brought this up before in previous webinars, and I'm going to do it again. The locked and unlocked button here is your friend. When it's locked, when your layout is locked, you can't move your fixtures around accidentally. This is very handy to know, and this is on a per layout basis. So I don't have to have all of my layouts locked at one time. It's only on that one as well. So it's something I definitely recommend doing after you spent all your time getting things laid out exactly the way you want them. Go through and lock the layout so that you don't accidentally drag things off. And then you'll be happy. So definitely remember that one. Let's go here and center this thing back up. All right. Okay, what do we got here for questions? Anything that needs to be answered, Jack?
I think we've covered most of them. You did most as well today. Any last questions, guys?
Fanning color, you hold the yellow modifier to fan a parameter. So if I turn those on, and if I wanted to fan color across them, I would first select, my starting point color. In this case, I'm just going to go from the center of the linear fan, and I hold the yellow modifier or the control key, and it will fan it. I could also fan intensities, or anything with a scroll bar I could fan. So again, first what I'm going to do is here, let me go back again. Do this again. Turn on some intensity. I'm just doing this normal right now. Now I'm going to hold the control key as I As I hold the control or yellow modifier and then drag, it's going to show me this bar here. And this is my fan for my maximum and minimum. While holding this, I can still change that fan so I can see how they're going from darker to brighter. If I let go of the yellow modifier, I can now move this entire range from the top or bottom. So you probably would see this more often in position. So if I have a pan fan of position, I'm holding the yellow or the control right now to do this, and I have this bar here so I can move that back and forth. And yeah, I could continue to do this on any one of these other parameters. So there's focus and zoom. Difference between scrolling size and scrolling for fan. I don't think I'm following that. Unless that was part of what I just went over. I mean, when I'm scrolling. Yeah, Brian, I'm not quite sure I understand what you're asking there.
I think you mean.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, now I get it. Yeah, so because the control key or the yellow modifier is used for multiple things in Vista, if I hold the yellow modifier down and I use the scroll wheel to move up and down these fixtures, it's going to zoom them in and out. But if I'm in a color, if I'm over here and on a features and I hold the yellow modifier and scroll, or not scroll, but drag the color, I can do that there. So it's more about the fact that if you're not paying attention to what you're doing with your scroll wheel on your mouse, it's possible to go and hold the, I'm trying to explain this. I know this is something that I've done to myself a number of times, so I'm trying to explain the best way of watching out. So let's say I'm thinking I'm going to go and I'm going to fan this color, but I'm getting a little bit antsy and I've already hit my control key. I'm hitting my control key right now. So I've got it held down, but I also at the same time have bumped my mouse wheel. So now I've just changed my icon size before I got over to this. So that's kind of where I'm going with all that. Because I tend to sit here with my finger on the control key a lot and ready to do things. Color is an easy one to show an example, but it's probably more often I'd do that with position. I'd be hitting my control quickly and changing things and doing all kinds of stuff, and then maybe I just changed those. So yeah, that's kind of where that goes. In Windows 10, Windows Touch on keyboard called the Windows menu. That's a separate key. So we're using Shift, Control, and Alt. And then in Windows, we use Control and Alt as the blue modifier. However, if you install Vista in console mode, the Windows key actually turns into the blue modifier because Windows doesn't pop up the menu.
Depending on keyboard as well, sometimes right alt can be blue. So we've got right alt, control alt, or the Windows key, so 3 options.
Yeah, and different region options on the keyboards do different things. So it's kind of you might have to test it a little bit to make sure it's working the way you think it's working. Oh yes, Stephen. Yeah, your comment. Finish color and try to pan out. Yeah, so that's another good one, especially when you're doing this. So another reason why it's good to lock, because once it's locked, oh, I take that back. We can still scroll. We can still zoom those in and out while it's locked.
I was just typing that. It is possible. I think it's sensible to suggest that Zoom should be locked when it's locked. We can.
I would say so too. I never actually checked on that, but yes, that would not be a good idea. All right. Yeah.
I'll add that to the system now. Let me just start typing.
Good times. I still stand by my statement that locked is good, so you're not dragging your icons all off. Yeah. All right. Well, I've got a few more minutes here. If anyone else has any other questions, now's the time.
I'll see if we can sneak that one in. Who knows? Let's see what we can do.
Yeah. Was there anything else brought up earlier, Jack, that needs a little demonstration?
No, I think we
we're good there
I
too.
think we covered it.
Okay. Perfect. Like I said, this is a fairly easier webinar. It's more basics. It's setting up your workspaces. Tomorrow we'll do some other stuff that might help with how we can set up layouts in ways that also help you play back your shows. A brief little, and that one doesn't really work. I was hoping I don't have a layout that really helps me with what I was just going to say. No, not really. But a brief little layout or a brief little thing would be if I did if I laid out a truss in order like this. I'm not going to go through the whole thing. If I wanted to see this as a truss, that's great. But again, it comes to the selection thing where I'm going to select those fixtures individually. So something I often will do is to keep them still in the same line. I might do this where I offset them just like that. That way I could drag around those and grab vipers, or drag around these and grab these. But if I have them in a single line, then at least it defines to me that these are in this order on the truss. And, I got my point and my viper. Or if, let's say I had a non-standard or different layout where I have, one, then two, then one, and all down the line, I can still do that. So it's kind of a hybrid layout between being fully in 2D plan and also being in the flown truss look here too, where it's in that order. So, but that's just a little bit of a teaser for tomorrow. Yes, we're gonna do some. I would like to do some webinars on connecting nodes for SAC and ArtNet. That seems to come up quite a bit in support. So
If we don't do them as webinars, I think we could certainly do them as a YouTube video, if not an interactive webinar.
I have a variety of node hardware in my office, so it might have to be me doing all this. I have an NTech and I've got a couple different Luminex devices, so yeah. These backgrounds were screen captures from WYSIWYG. So in the previous webinars when we're using WYSIWYG, it's the exact same screen capture. Because it's a PNG file or a JPEG file, you could do anything. You could do a line drawing in Microsoft Paint for all that matters to lay a background in there.
It could be a photograph of your venue if you haven't got any CAD package or anything as well. It doesn't have to be CAD based.
Yep. Yeah, and Dan, that's something. That's actually something we'll see in a future build of Vista as well, where we can disable network broadcast from other machines. So yeah, there's some other things there, but I'm gonna try not to get into that right now. So all right, well, looks like we have used up our time. So with that, thanks everybody for attending, and hope you learned something out of this. And we'll see you on the next one tomorrow, maybe. Yeah. So with that, thank you and see y'all later.